Imagine waking up in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. The sun is just beginning to rise above the Nile. Farmers are already heading toward the fields. Builders are preparing their tools. Merchants are opening their stalls. And you? Well, instead of carrying a shovel or a basket, you are carrying something much more dangerous. Homework. You are a scribe's apprentice. Now, that might not sound very exciting today. After all, most of us spend our lives surrounded by writing. We send texts, read signs, scroll through social media, and sometimes even read instruction manuals if things get really desperate. But in the ancient world, writing was almost like a superpower. Most people could not read. Most people could not write. In some places, only a tiny percentage of the population knew how to turn spoken words into symbols. If you could write, you belonged to a very special group. And becoming part of that group was not easy. Let's follow a young apprentice through a typical day. The morning begins early, very early. Ancient teachers apparently shared a belief with modern teachers that sleeping in was a terrible idea. The apprentice arrives at school carrying writing materials. In Egypt, that might include papyrus sheets and a wooden palette. In Mesopotamia, it could mean clay tablets and a stylus. The classroom is not filled with colorful posters or motivational slogans. There are no beanbag chairs. There is definitely no air conditioning. Instead, there are rows of students preparing for hours of practice. And when we say practice, we mean endless practice. A young apprentice might spend much of the day copying the same symbols over and over again. One line, then another, then perhaps a few hundred more. Ancient writing systems were not simple. Egyptian hieroglyphs contained hundreds of symbols. Mesopotamian cuneiform was also highly complex. Learning them required patience, memory, and a willingness to spend large parts of your childhood staring at tiny marks. Many ancient texts that survive today are actually student exercises. Some contain mistakes. Some contain repeated phrases. Some look suspiciously similar to a child filling pages because the teacher said so. Apparently, students have always found creative ways to survive school. The apprentice's teachers expected perfection. A single mistake in an important document could create serious problems. Imagine recording the wrong tax amount, or writing down the wrong grain delivery, or accidentally changing a legal agreement. That could lead to confusion, arguments, or worse. So apprentices learned accuracy before anything else. They copied stories. They copied prayers. They copied official records. Then they copied them again and again. If this sounds a little boring, well, sometimes it probably was. But there was a reward waiting at the end. A successful scribe could enjoy a much more comfortable life than many other workers. Ancient Egyptian texts sometimes praised the profession by comparing it to harder jobs. One famous text describes workers laboring under the hot sun while the scribe sits comfortably indoors. The message was clear. Study hard now. Avoid carrying giant rocks later. Of course, the reality was not always quite so simple. Being a scribe came with its own pressures. A scribe was responsible for keeping society organized. Governments depended on written records. Temples depended on written records. Merchants depended on written records. Even kings depended on written records. Without scribes, taxes could not be tracked properly. Land ownership could become disputed. Trade agreements could disappear. Large civilizations needed information to move from one place to another. Scribes were the people who made that happen. In a way, they were the human version of a computer database, just with fewer buttons and much more papyrus. As the apprentice grows older, the lessons become harder. Now they are not simply copying symbols. They are learning mathematics. They are learning accounting. They are learning official language used in government documents. Some may specialize in temple work. Others may enter royal administration. Some may work for merchants. A few may even serve directly in the palace. Their education opens doors that remain closed to most people. For many families, having a child become a scribe was a dream. Physical labor dominated daily life in the ancient world. Fields needed plowing. Buildings needed construction. Goods needed transportation. Most work demanded strength and endurance. The scribe's profession offered something different. It offered social status. It offered stability. And sometimes it offered influence. A skilled scribe could interact with powerful officials. They could manage records worth enormous amounts of wealth. They could become trusted advisors, all because they had mastered a skill that few others possessed. As evening approaches, our apprentice finally finishes the day's lessons. The classroom grows quieter. The writing tools are packed away. The teacher is hopefully satisfied. At least for today. The apprentice heads home. Tomorrow will likely look very similar. More symbols. More copying. More memorization. Perhaps a few sore fingers. But each day brings them closer to joining one of the most respected professions in the ancient world. And while history often focuses on pharaohs, emperors, and generals, many of the things we know about those famous figures survive because scribes carefully recorded them. They preserved laws. They recorded trade. They documented victories. They copied religious texts. They tracked harvests. They wrote letters. They kept civilizations running behind the scenes. Most people from the ancient world left no written record of their lives. Their stories disappeared with time. But scribes left marks that could survive for thousands of years. Even now, archaeologists continue to uncover tablets, scrolls, and inscriptions created by these quiet workers. Each symbol offers a small window into a vanished world. And somewhere among those surviving texts may be the work of a former apprentice. A student who spent years practicing symbols while dreaming of a better future. A child who probably got tired of homework. A young writer who never imagined that people thousands of years later would still be reading their words. Not bad for a day's work. Or several thousand days of work. And as we leave the classrooms of the ancient world behind, we can appreciate just how important these forgotten workers truly were. Because long before modern offices, computers, and spreadsheets, there were scribes. Patiently writing, carefully recording, and helping hold entire civilizations together, one symbol at a time. Now that we've left the quiet classrooms of the scribes behind, let us step outside into the bright morning sun. The city is waking up. Merchants are opening their shops. Bakers are preparing fresh bread. Temple workers are sweeping courtyards. Children are running through narrow streets. And somewhere nearby, a worker is beginning a job that almost every person in the city depends upon. A job so common and so important that most people hardly notice it. The river water carrier. Imagine living in a large ancient city. Maybe it is Egypt along the Nile. Maybe it is a bustling town in Mesopotamia beside the Tigris or Euphrates. Perhaps it is somewhere else entirely. No matter the location, one thing remains the same. There are no kitchen faucets, no shower heads, no water coolers, and certainly no helpful refrigerator that magically produces ice cubes whenever you feel fancy. If you want water, someone has to bring it. That someone might be you. Your day begins before sunrise. The air is still cool. The streets are mostly quiet. Balancing wooden poles across your shoulders, you walk toward the river. Around you, dozens of other carriers are doing the same. Everyone knows that the earlier you begin, the better. Once the sun climbs higher, the work becomes much harder. The river appears calm in the early light. Birds skim across the surface. Fishing boats drift quietly nearby. For a brief moment, everything feels peaceful. Then the work begins. Large clay jars must be filled. Each jar is surprisingly heavy. Water may seem light when it comes out of a cup. But when you carry several large containers at once, it suddenly develops a very strong personality. The jars are attached to poles or balanced carefully for transport. Then comes the difficult part, carrying them back through the city. Street after street, house after house, hour after hour. Water carriers developed impressive strength. They had to. A family might require several deliveries each day. Temples required even more. Workshops consumed huge amounts of water. Public buildings constantly needed fresh supplies. Everyone depended on the carriers. Without them, daily life would quickly grind to a halt. As the morning progresses, the city grows busier. Customers call out requests. Shopkeepers wave from doorways. Servants emerge from wealthy homes carrying payment. The carrier moves steadily from location to location. Some customers are friendly. Others complain. Apparently, customer service has existed for thousands of years. Some things never change. The work can be exhausting. Ancient cities were not designed with comfort in mind. Roads could be uneven. Dust filled the air. Summer temperatures often became intense. By midday, the carrier's shoulders ache. Their legs feel heavy. Sweat drips from their forehead. And there is still more water to deliver. Yet despite the difficulty, water carriers played a critical role in urban survival. Water was not simply used for drinking. It was needed for cooking. It was needed for cleaning. It was needed for making pottery. It was needed for brewing beer. In fact, many ancient societies consumed beer regularly because it was often safer than untreated water. Imagine explaining to someone that your daily hydration plan involves bread and beer. Ancient people would probably nod and say, "Sounds perfectly reasonable." The carrier's work connected every part of society. Rich households needed water. Poor households needed water. Priests needed water. Farmers needed water. Even animals depended on the constant movement of fresh supplies. In many ways, the water carrier served as part of the city's lifeline. And that lifeline always began at the river. For civilizations like Egypt, the Nile was far more than a river. It was the foundation of everything. The annual floods brought fertile soil. The water supported agriculture. Trade routes followed its course. Entire cities grew because of its presence. Without the Nile, ancient Egypt as we know it might never have existed. The same was true for the great rivers of Mesopotamia. Human civilization flourished where water could be found. And water carriers helped distribute that precious resource to everyone else. Of course, the job came with risks. Riverbanks could be slippery. Heavy jars sometimes broke. Floods could create dangerous conditions. During drought years, finding enough clean water became much more difficult. The carrier often witnessed the direct effects of nature on society. A good flood could bring prosperity. A poor flood could bring hardship. Entire communities watched river levels with nervous attention. Their future depended on it. As afternoon arrives, the heat reaches its peak. The city seems to shimmer beneath the sun. The carrier slows slightly but continues working. There are always more deliveries. Always another household waiting. Always another jar needing to be filled. Perhaps they stop briefly beneath a patch of shade. Perhaps they share conversation with other workers. Water carriers often formed small communities of their own. They understood the challenges of the profession better than anyone. After all, few people truly appreciate how heavy water is until they spend all day carrying it. As evening approaches, the city begins to settle. Markets close. Families gather for meals. The streets gradually quiet down. For many residents, the day's water has already arrived. Meals can be prepared. Washing can be done. Tomorrow's needs have been secured. The carrier finally returns to the river one last time. The sunlight reflects across the surface in shades of gold. The day's work is nearly complete. Their shoulders are tired. Their feet are sore. But they have helped keep an entire city functioning. Most people will never remember their names. No statues will likely be built in their honor. No great monuments will celebrate their achievements. History tends to notice kings much more often than delivery workers. Yet every palace, temple, workshop, and household depended on people like them. The great cities of the ancient world could not have survived without a steady flow of water. And that flow often moved one jar at a time. So tonight, as the sun disappears beyond the horizon and the city drifts toward sleep, spare a thought for the forgotten water carriers. The workers who spent their days walking dusty streets. The workers who carried one of life's most basic necessities. The workers who helped entire civilizations thrive without ever becoming famous. One step